Many people today generally do not think about where their goods come from. More often than not, it's as simple as reading the bottom of the packaging of an item, and it's not uncommon in modern-day America to see "Made in China" stamped or printed on an item. It's also not uncommon for that imported good to be shipped by rail. Especially in the Midwest or on an opposite coast, trains are often responsible for the long-haul freight. A large amount of technology and resources are used to ship these "Made in China" items from the coastal ports to distribution centers across the country. It is because of the various complex technological parts that create a complex system. Malcolm Gladwell states in his article Blowup, from his book What the Dogs Saw, that the more complex the system, the more, quote, inevitable that some combinations of minor failures will eventually amount to something catastrophic, unquote, because these complex systems are made up of thousands of independent parts which could fail at any given moment. While catastrophic railroad incidents have occurred, they aren't too common, and these occasional disasters are still outweighed by the benefits of rail efficiency. Ever since railroads were created, they've been a means of moving freight. Trains originally were very small, but the term iron horse is rather symbolic. Trains were used to move freight efficiently and quickly compared to the horse and wagon. Aside from rivers and dirt roads, trains were just another way to connect cities. The steel wheels on steel rails create little friction, meaning trains are able to move more efficiently. As time went on and railroads expanded, the western states of the United States became larger and more box-like. This is likely because railroads meant towns could be built away from a river or a stream. In eastern states, railroads weren't around when the states were created, and rivers were the most efficient means of transportation. The only direct way from a city across land was by foot or horse, which meant towns were usually built pretty close together. Railroads enabled towns to be spread apart, meaning rivers were no longer an essential means of transporting goods in the western states. Also, railroads created new markets. The speed of trains allowed produce from California and cattle from Kansas to be sold in a matter of days in New York. It's this efficiency that is still around today. Modern railroads consist of track, locomotives and cars, signals, along with employees for car and signal maintenance, station masters, engineers, conductors, and dispatchers. All across the nation, electrical components send information to computers and dispatchers, while giving train crews information as to location of spacing of other nearby trains. For each railroad, there is a central point where all of the trains are dispatched from. Burlington Northern Santa Fe's dispatch center, for example, is in Fort Worth, Texas, meaning all of the trains on BNSF's track anywhere in the nation are controlled from Texas. This system regulates the travel of thousands of trains daily across the country. In today's economy, railroads are heavily relied on, although it is usually not thought of. Tons of freight are moved each year by rail, contributing to the transportation and distribution of goods in the United States. BNSF Railway owns over 32,000 miles of track and about 40,000 employees. BNSF reports that, quote, in 2007, almost 5 million intermodal shipments were transported on BNSF's rail line instead of on the nation's congested highways, unquote. This means that BNSF alone kept 5 million semi-trucks off the highways in 2007. Based on personal observations, many double-stack trains are generally between 60 and 80 cars long. That means one average double-stack train is equivalent to 120 to 160 semi-trucks that are traveling by rail rather than interstate. Many of the products that are moved through intermodal services, quote, include such items as mail, small package goods, paper products, clothes, appliances, electronic products, and auto parts, unquote. Also, quote, during peak season between Thanksgiving and Christmas, BNSF ships more than 50 million packages for UPS on time, unquote. So those Christmas gifts that Santa ordered online were probably delivered with the help of some, quote, iron reindeer. BNSF moves more than just intermodal. About half of BNSF's agricultural products are exported at ports along the West Coast, the Gulf of Mexico, and the Great Lakes. So while your phone was made in China, the wheat that China imports could have been made in Nebraska. BNSF also moves, quote, enough lumber each year to build more than 500,000 homes, unquote, and they haul enough recycled metals to make enough, quote, reinforcing bar to rebuild more than 3,900 miles of interstate highway, unquote. As a business owner, why make a product if you can't distribute it to customers? Railroads make sure that the products get distributed. From grain in the Midwest to intermodal goods from foreign nations, railroads move almost everything. Modern locomotives are capable of pulling a lot of freight. Because of this, many trains today are able to be much longer. However, many people find these long trains a nuisance. While they can be unsightly and irritating for commuters stuck behind a train blocking a railroad crossing, they are helping to reduce the impact that modern industry has on the environment. CSX Railway boasts, quote, that a CSX train can move freight 470 miles on a single gallon of fuel, up from 466 miles in 2012, an all-time record-setting efficiency, unquote. CSX, as well as most other Class 1s, are also upgrading their locomotives to GE Evolution series, which save, quote, approximately 12,600 gallons of diesel fuel each year, unquote. This is all in an effort to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. Union Pacific Railway thanks their customers for helping, quote, eliminate an estimated 33.7 million metric tons of greenhouse gases by choosing rail over truck transportation for their shipping needs, unquote, which could roughly cover an area similar to the size of Tennessee. Because, quote, rail is 3 to 4 times more fuel efficient than trucks, unquote, more freight can be moved with less fuel compared to truck freight, making rail freight much more efficient. If 10% of the long-haul truck freight were switched to rail, quote, fuel savings would exceed 1 billion gallons per year, unquote. Using oil as an example, rail cars for oil could hold approximately 32,000 gallons of liquid, compared to a semi's trailer capacity of about 8,000 gallons. Many oil trains today are about 110 cars long. Each oil car is then equivalent to 4 semis. Therefore, one average oil train is equivalent to 440 semis. I've spent many years watching trains in Oregon, Illinois on the BNSF, and they usually run about 4 oil trains per day. That's approximately equivalent to 1,760 semis hauling oil across the country. And semis can't drive themselves, so one person needs to drive one truck. One oil train's worth of semis would require 440 different people to drive those trucks. By switching that to rail, it not only clears the interstate up a bit, but it also saves businesses money because 2 people, the conductor and the engineer, are in charge of 110 cars of oil. From the perspective of oil companies, I certainly would not want to pay over 1,000 truck drivers to ship my oil. Back before railroads crossed the nation, horse and foot were the means of transportation. Prior to the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad in 1869, quote, the trip from the East Coast to the West Coast could take more than 4 months, unquote, but after it was completed, travel was reduced to a mere 3.5 days from New York to San Francisco on the Transcontinental Express. When the Lewis and Clark expedition explored the Louisiana Purchase in the Northwest Territory, it took about 2 years for them to go from St. Louis to the Pacific Ocean. On a similar journey in length, Amtrak's Empire Builder, which runs from Chicago to either Portland, Oregon or Seattle, Washington, in just 2 days. Freight rail has a lower priority than passenger rail, but it's still just as timely. Union Pacific and CSX run a produce Railexpress, which is a unit train made entirely of refrigerated rail cars. Originating from either Washington or California, this train carries fresh produce to South Schenectady, New York, in just 5 days. Another great example demonstrating the speed of the rail network is BNSF's intermodal service, which at its fastest, quote, moves 760 miles per day, 200 miles more than single truck service, unquote. Railroads truly are one of the greatest engineering marvels that exist in today's world. The fact that so much freight can be moved with so little fuel is absolutely astounding, and the speed at which these tons of freight can cross the nation is just incredible. Many people will argue, however, that planes are much quicker than trains. While it is possible to fly from New York to San Francisco in a matter of hours, keep in mind that it's usually just one person and their bag or 2 of luggage. Most freight that is shipped by air generally is only mail or packages, much of which is the overnight shipping from one point to another, covering a great distance. According to the U.S. Department of Transportation, only 10 million tons of freight were shipped by air in 2002, compared to the 1,897 million tons shipped by rail. Many of the larger items, such as televisions and raw materials, are shipped by rail since it's much more efficient to ship in bulk. As previously stated with the oil, it is better to ship the 440 truckloads of oil by rail because it's quicker, more environmentally friendly, and generally cheaper. So, while planes are in fact much quicker, they usually haul much less product than trains. UPS, which has an airport in Rockford, ships frequently on BNSF Railway, and BNSF ships holiday packages on time by rail during the late fall, as mentioned previously. How does this compare to other transportation? Trucks usually get the rail freight, but only after it's been hauled a long distance by rail. Union Pacific has an intermodal hub known as Global 3 in Rochelle, Illinois. They receive intermodal trains from all over the country, where giant cranes unload the containers and semi-trailers, which then get sent to the places railroads can't get to, such as businesses in downtown areas and companies that don't have rail service. Plus, as also previously mentioned, it's much more environmentally and economically efficient to ship by rail, as greenhouse gases and fuel consumption are reduced, fewer people are in charge of much more freight. While trains are much more efficient, some people argue that trains are unsafe. After many recent oil disasters, pipelines are coming into play and oil shipping has become a huge political debate. While train derailments can occur, many go undetected to the public. On March 3, 2013, a Union Pacific train derailed a couple cars at the Chrysler plant in Belvidere. When I drove past, all the cars were upright, but there was damage to a few, and there were work trucks and bulldozers running about everywhere trying to repair the track and remove the damaged rail cars. This incident never made the news. In November of 2013, I went to Thompson, Illinois, and there were 3 or 4 rail cars set off to the side. They were laying on their sides and had derailed about a month earlier. This incident also never made the news. There was one incident in 2013 where a set of wheels had come out from under a rail car. The rail car was hoisted up and the wheels replaced, and they went on their way. I also did not hear about that on TV. Even my father sent me pictures sometime last year of a few rail cars that had been heavily damaged in Davis Junction. One was a grain car, and another was an auto carrier that had also been damaged, and the Chevy truck on the second level inside the rail car had come unchained and broken the door on the rail car. That also didn't get posted in the news. Yet lately, more and more talk has come up about oil and the safety that comes with it. The current issue with oil disasters is the complexity of the system. More often than not, the older DOT 111 style cars are involved, which are weaker and have less safety measures. The newer CPC 1232s have thicker steel and valve protection, which makes them a little bit safer. Add these weaker rail cars to a common rail error, such as split rail or a lazy crew member, and you end up with a bomb exploding. Regardless, the U.S. Department of Transportation is creating tighter restrictions on newer rail cars, including, quote, enhanced tank head and shell puncture resistance systems for the 111 cars in a bid to reduce the risk of a spill or other accident in the event of a derailment, unquote. Pipelines aren't any better, though. The issue with pipelines is the fact that they're generally underground. So, if a pipeline leaks, it can go undetected, and probably would go undetected until it started pooling on the surface or began contaminating drinking water. With railroads, there are always at least 2 people managing this moving pipeline. When disasters do happen, they're quick to be reported and quick actions are made to manage the cleanup and save those nearby. While both are not great options for moving oil, rail can be managed much easier, thus making it better. The biggest reason that more and more oil accidents have been making the news is simply because there's more oil. And since the best way to move that oil is by rail, there have been more and more oil derailments that are disastrous. While the railroads can have their devastating moments, the benefits definitely outweigh the problems, thus making rail the most efficient means of freight transportation in the United States today. Thousands of trains move daily to ensure the economy can move forward. Coal is sent to power plants, electronics are sent to distributors, grain is sent to the coasts, and produce is sent across the country. It is without a doubt that the web of steel which spans the nation is the most efficient means of moving freight. Gladwell had mentioned that NASA had 6 volumes of acceptable risks for the Challenger space shuttle. Unfortunately, one of those acceptable risks became an undetected problem, creating a disaster. Railroads are similar. Quite frequently, there's a minor failure, many of which can be fixed in a matter of hours. Every once in a while, you throw in another variable, such as oil cars, and you have yourself a disaster. Nonetheless, that oil could have been shipped by truck, and if you've ever driven a car, you know that there is great danger in the U.S. road system in terms of accidents that can happen. If we put 440 oil trucks on highways, it's very likely that operator error could cause a major problem. But instead, we move that oil by rail, reducing the interstate congestion due to semi-trucks. Fuel is saved by using 2 or 3 locomotives to pull what 440 semi-trucks could pull. Locomotives are becoming more and more green. General Electric is already working on building a locomotive which conforms to the Tier 4 EPA regulations, which will further reduce the amount of greenhouse gases that are emitted from locomotives. Liquefied natural gas is also being tested, as the liquefied natural gas burns much cleaner than standard diesel fuel. It's these improvements that, over time, have built the rail network that exists today. Every second, trains are shipping goods from coast to coast, border to border, and city to city, to ensure the economy keeps rolling forward. This is why the rail network in America is one of our greatest accomplishments, and it will surely remain so for generations to come.
That's all correct, over.
Roger that, sir, thanks.